To get started on this exercise, you should have downloaded the Anticipation Ball Animate file. Let's double click on it and open it up. Now, this particular exercise builds on what we've done from squash and stretch. As a matter of fact, if you play the file, you can see it's a simple bouncing ball that squashes and stretches as it bounces. What we're going to be doing is adding on more anticipation to the ball's bounce and giving it a more lifelike feel. Now, if you follow along with the book, we're going to be following each of the instructions for the most part exactly as they appear in the book, although I may change up a few things slightly. You can also see that the color of my ball is different, and I've added a background just to add some interest to your final design. Now, the first thing we want to do for this exercise is have the ball start not up in the air, but actually down on the ground. This means we'll need to do some editing to our timeline to get it to start on the ground and have it pop up into the air and then bounce from there. So let's go down to our timeline. In order to do this, let's select all of the frames. So I'm going to click on frame number 1, hold down Shift as I click on frame number 25, and you can see that gets all the frames in between. From there, we can right-click on it and choose Copy Frames. Notice the keyboard shortcut for this, if you're using a Mac, is Option-Command-C. When you copy these frames, you can then select the 25th frame and then right-click on that and choose to paste the frames. What this is going to do is copy not just the objects, but all of the framing and timing and paste it right within that timeline as well. Let's do the same thing for the background layer just so we can add on to it. So hold down Shift and select all the frames on the background, right-click on it and choose Copy Frames, and select that 25th frame, and we're going to paste it right on top of there to add those frames onto this. Now we've essentially got it bouncing twice. Now let's return to our timeline, and I want to select this second keyframe on frame number 12. What this is the final stretching keyframe before it finally hits the ground and squashes. We're going to select this keyframe, right-click on it, and tell it to clear the keyframe. So this will get rid of that solid object. From here, you can see how the ball is going to fall down or move into a squashing position. So what we need to do is select frame number 1. Then we need to move the ball all the way down until it reaches the same spot that it bounces. In order to do this, let's turn on our onion skinning. So with frame 1 selected, turn on your onion skin preferences, and let's set the range of our onion skin by clicking on the green until I can see that final little layer here. It's barely visible right here, but I can see the bottom edge just slightly along the bottom edge there. From here, I can use my black arrow selection tool and move my ball directly down until it matches that final edge. Now as it gets closer, you can see how all of them are starting to get closer and closer together. Here's where the edge is. We want to bring it down until the edge of my ball matches the edge of that part right there. We can now turn off onion skinning by clicking on our little icon. Oops, we'll go away with that. There we go. Now when we press play, you can see it's going to squash the ball down before finally popping up. And this is the anticipation that we're looking for. Now with this done, let's have the ball return back down to the ground level. To do this, go down to your timeline, select the 25th frame and hold down Shift and select all the way to the 38th frame. Notice that this will get all of that returning down and including the other 2 keyframes. Also, when I clicked and held Shift, I selected both the layers on the ball layer and the background layer, so both of those are selected. When you right-click on it, you can then copy these frames. Now let's select both of the keyframes on these layers, so this is keyframe 49 for both of the layers. Right-click on that, and let's paste those frames. Now the ball, once it bounces a second time, returns back down to the bottom, and you can see that it starts to bounce back up again. What we want to have is the ball returning to its original position from frame number 1. So instead of it bouncing up, we want it to be the same frame as frame number 1. So I'm going to go to frame 1 and select it, right click on that and copy that frame. Then we can return to the end of our animation and right click and paste the frame there to add it to there. We should also extend our background, so I'm going to click on this layer and I'm going to hit F5 to add on one more frame, just to add a frame there. Now when it bounces up and returns back to its original position. Now if we were to test this, we'll go up to Control and let's test the movie and see what our timing looks like. So far it's pretty good, but it's still a little quirky, especially right at the very end when it lands. If we go to our animation, you can see how all of these parts are happening very, very quickly, all at the same time. So let's give ourselves a little bit more time in between each of these main parts. I'm going to go to this second to last keyframe. In my case, it's keyframe number 62. And I'm going to hit my F5 key just once to give it a single frame in between there. Let's do the same for the other one. So in this case, I'm selecting the squash keyframe and hitting the F5 key, and that'll add another keyframe in between those. Adding that little bit of extra time will allow it to more naturally flow into a resting position. Now also, we can see we're losing our background, so select your background layer and hit F5 to add some more time to that line as well. Now in looking at our overall timing, I would like to give it a little bit more anticipation before it pops up into the air. So to add a little bit more time for that first little movement, let's go down to our timeline. Since this part is our anticipation part, I'm going to put my cursor anywhere in between there, and I'm going to hit the F5 key to add on some more frames. You can see as I hit F5, it's adding on the frames and pushing everything down. And I want to add enough time until this second keyframe reaches frame number 40. So keep hitting it several times until right there. Now frame 40 is lined up with that second keyframe where it squashes down. Of course, when I do this, you can see it also puts my background off. So let's select the background and give it some more time to match the ball's time on our timeline. The other thing I want to do is add some easing in and easing out to our anticipation. So select that first frame. Let's go over to our Properties panel, and under Tweening, change the effect from a classic ease in to let's choose ease in and ease out. Now from here you can choose any one of these. I'm just going to keep it the simple quad easing in. So double click on that to add that effect. Now when it plays, you can see it slowly pops into it and it's looking much better. Now the last thing that I want to do to the anticipation is have it pause just before it pops into the air. To do this, let's go to our timeline, and this 40th keyframe is the last frame before it finally pops up and pops into the air. And so to let it pause right on there, we need to add more time to our keyframe line or to a timeline at this point. So with the 40th frame selected, hit the F5 key and add 5 frames to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now of course when we do this, we still have a classic tween added to this, and if we were to play it, all that would do is morph into it. We want to have it pause just on this particular shape. So let's right click on this area and let's remove the classic tween. And this will turn it into just a basic shape that'll pause on that point. Now when we play it, it'll go down, pause, and then pop right back up. Of course, now let's go back to our background layer, hit F5, and add some more time to that timeline as well. Now let's adjust the height of each of the jumps. You can see the first one pops up, and the second one bounces just as high. If this were losing momentum, the second jump shouldn't be as high as that first one. So going to my timeline, let's choose that second jump. In this case, it's frame number 81. And with the 81st frame selected, click on your ball and let's drag it down about half the height that it was before. Now when it jumps up, it'll go up half the height. Now when we do this, we also need to adjust the timing of it. Because it's traveling at a shorter distance, it shouldn't take as long in order to get there. In order to do this, we need to remove some frames before and after the jump that was created. So I'm going to go to this part of my keyframing and select 3 frames. Hold down Shift and get 1, 2, 3 frames. And with those 3 frames selected, in order to remove them, we're going to right-click on it and we're going to choose Remove Frames. Notice that the keyboard shortcut is Shift F5. With those 3 frames now removed, let's remove 3 frames from this side as well. So clicking here, you can either select 3 keyframes or you can do Shift F5 3 times. So Shift F5 once, twice, 3 times. Now with that done, the timing and the height of that second jump is well adjusted. From here, you can see it also adjusted our background, so we need to remove these 6 frames. So put your cursor along the background, hold down Shift, and hit F5 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to remove those extra 6 frames that aren't needed for the background. If I were to test this out and play it all the way through, it pops up, goes down, and then goes down to here. The final thing that's really annoying me about the way it's resting is the amount of stretch that's happening. You can see that when it falls down, it's not falling as fast or as far as the first one, so it shouldn't stretch out this much. Instead, we should bring that stretch in by just a little bit. In order to do this, let's select that 86th frame, this stretching frame here, and adjust the amount of stretch that's happening. You can do this by opening up the Transform panel. So I'm going to go up to Window and choose Transform. And with the ball selected on this 81st frame, instead of it stretching out 80%, let's set it to be about 85%. And then let's adjust our height of it to be 115%. So this is going to bring it in by just a bit. We'll do the same thing for the squash effect too. So going down to our next keyframe, in this case it'll be frame number 87. Instead of it squashing down 20%, let's do 115. And then this next one should be 85%. Whoops, for that one. Finally, when it pops back up, it shouldn't pop up that much. It should be losing even more. So instead of it being 80%, let's go 90. And this should be 110. As long as those two numbers add up to be 200, you're good to go for that. And then finally, it rests back down to here. I'm going to go up to Control and let's test the movie again. So it pops up, bounces, back down. I'm still seeing a slight issue with that last rest, and I bet I know what's happening. Let's go back to our design. In looking at those final frames, let's make sure we can see both the frames and the ball itself. I'll get rid of our transform. I can see that it's trying to pop up and move up before finally resting. So I'm going to select this second to last keyframe. This is frame number 89, and I'm going to nudge the ball down just a bit. If you want, you can turn on your onion scanning. You can see how much it's actually having to move between those two. So with that 89th frame selected, use your arrow keys and let's nudge it downward so that it doesn't pop up so much. I think that's good for there. Turn off onion scanning. Now with that done, whenever I play it, should pop up and then not bounce so high for that second one. Much, much better. Now the last thing that we're going to do for this exercise is to really emphasize that anticipation by adding a little bit of a quiver to the ball. If you're following along with the textbook, the book mentions 2 different methods of adding this quiver. We're going to be doing the method that's mentioned on page 82. So to do this method, let's select the first keyframe. And if you remember, we added our own easing in and easing out within the tweening effect found under your Properties panel. When you click on it, you can see this is the bell curve that's created that shows the easing in effect and the easing out effect. What we want to do is to create a custom effect. So click on Custom and let's create a new one. Double click on New. and this will bring up your custom easing picker. The first thing we want to do is click on the bottom leftmost point, and this will give you a Bezier handle that we can click and drag straight down. This gives us that curve for easing in. Then we can click on the top rightmost point and click up, and this will adjust the easing out. So there's that ease in and out bell curve that we already created. Now at any time you can test and see what this looks like by clicking on the little play button, and that will play through and show you what that easing in and out effect will look like on your design. Now to add the quiver portion to this, we're going to click along this little timeline and add some extra points every so often along the way. Now there really is no set number that needs to be on here. About 10 or so is all that's necessary. Let's get one more. There's one right there. Then go back to your timeline and click on every other point and drag it downward. What we want to create is kind of this little roller coaster effect. We'll add maybe one more right here. That looks something like this. Now when we play and test this, check out our ball. As it goes down, you can see how it quivers just before it pops into the air. And this is what really sells that anticipation. Once you're finished, you can hit Save and Apply, and that will apply it to your final timeline. With this done, now let's go up to Control, and let's test our movie one last time. And that looks fantastic. Let's close this out. You can go up to File, and let's do a Save As. Do make sure to add your name to the file. Make sure the file format is a Flash file, and you can upload this Flash file to the class Moodle page.